All right, here we go. Well, welcome to another edition of Art Brunch, the first Art Brunch of 2023. Glad you're here. Glad you can make it. Let's go ahead and get started. The Cave, the Dragon, and the Treasure. How many of you actually believe in dragons? Not the Eastern Komodo dragon, which is the largest lizard in the world, but the flying, fire-breathing, treasure-guarding dragon. Dragons exist in every culture, from the Far East to the Near East to Europe to Native America. We're going to focus on the Western dragon, who tends to guard treasure. The first question we need to ask about such dragons is, why are they guarding treasure in the first place? They can't go to the local village market and spend any of it. I guess if the internet and Amazon had been around, they could have happily spent it, but what would a dragon buy? A herd of cows, maybe? Certainly not a dragon sweater. I think dragons run hot, by the way. Now, dragons started out as serpents. There are many ancient myths from the Near East where serpents serve the gods by guarding some type of treasure that is owned by the gods. And we're most familiar with the ancient Hebrew people who adapted these legends into their own story in Genesis 3. There, the serpent guards the treasure of divine knowledge. Yet, like Prometheus, the serpent betrays the gods by sharing the treasure with humans. God, of course, punishes the serpent by cursing it, telling the serpent that you and human beings will now forever be adversaries. The word dragon goes back to the classical Greek and Roman period. Ladon, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Ladon or Ladon, L-A-D-O-N, a monstrous Greek and Roman mythological figure, was known as Drakon, D-R-A-K-O-N. He coils around a tree which is full of golden apples in the garden of Hesperides and guards these apples for the gods. Heracles, or Hercules to the Romans, goes and slays the dragon and retrieves the golden apples as part of his 11th labor. Well, somewhere along the way, dragons began hiding their treasure in caves for themselves, not for the gods. Now, our ancient storytellers were not whimsically altering these stories. These stories evolved so that they could better express the human condition. Caves have an important metaphorical function. The famous mythologist Joseph Campbell reportedly stated, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek." Now, why on earth would any of us enter a dark cave knowing that there might be a monster in there, like a dragon? Well, obviously, because the dragon guards something of enormous value, a treasure. The treasure is that thing that is critical to the expansion of our soul. The treasure is that thing that is critical to the expansion of our soul. It's the thing that will save us, and in saving us, it will save the world. This story, depicted by Rembrandt, is a parable told by Jesus, which appears in Matthew 13:44. Now again, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found. I think we are born with a natural impulse to seek out treasure of any kind. When I was very young, I used to pick random spots in the woods near my house and just start digging, just in case the treasure was buried there. Usually there was just a rock. One time I did dig up a can. I was pretty excited. It wasn't gold or silver, but it was a kind of metal at least. What about you? Did you search for hidden treasure when you were a kid? We are born with a desire to seek out that which is hidden, because we intuitively know what is hidden might be of great value to us. And it needs to be hidden, or at least not readily available. We need to actually seek it out and work for it. As we get older, the treasure becomes more abstract. From hidden chests full of pirate booty to forbidden knowledge to spiritual wisdom. Now, what about the cave? What does it mean? In the hero's journey, that archetypal journey common in the mythical stories across every major culture, we know there comes a moment when the hero must descend into the abyss. And in this case, it's a cave. The cave is our unconscious self, the hidden part of us that must be explored. It is where our shadow resides. All those experiences and traits we don't want to think about, we don't want to acknowledge. The cave represents our greatest fears, that which keeps us from becoming our higher self. That is why the hero in the great myths must descend into the cave. He or she cannot be transformed into a hero otherwise. Now, what about the dragon? Joseph Campbell, again, in his famous interview that he did with Bill Moyers on PBS, said the dragon is a force, an energy that actually lives inside all of us. And it's called the ego. That part of us that seeks its own agenda, that shouts out, mine. It hoards treasure because it's more about preserving itself. The dragon fears losing the treasure, so the treasure just lies fallow in the cave. It does no good for anybody, except make the dragon feel more secure. But all the spiritual traditions teach us that the only reason to acquire a treasure is to share it, or even give it away, so that it will benefit the world. Now, we don't speak about real dragons today because we don't believe they exist. But we know now that the inner dragon does exist. The inner dragon is very real. The inner dragon could be any old belief that is no longer serving us, but which we refuse to let go of. The inner dragon could be a childhood trauma. It could be familial obligations that constrict us. It could be a job that takes up too much of our time and energy and sucks the life out of our spirit. But my favorite description for the inner dragon comes from a book I've mentioned to you before. You may remember that I've referenced The Art of War in previous presentations. In this classic text, Stephen Pressfield refers to a protean, malevolent force in the universe called resistance with a capital R. In many religious traditions, it would be called the devil or a personal demon. We could also call it the dragon, as Pressfield does. On the field of the self, he says, stand a knight and a dragon. You are the knight. Resistance is the dragon. The battle must be fought every day anew. Pressfield, we go back here. Pressfield claims this force called resistance shows up whenever we do any activity that will lead us toward growth. It comes in the form of the paralyzing blank page for a writer, in the form of ESPN, sometimes for me, or cute kitten videos. It comes in the form of well-meaning friends and family who encourage a less risky path in life. It could arrive in the form of procrastination or escapism or any form of distraction. Here's one of the descriptions about the force from Pressfield's book. Resistance is experienced as fear. The degree of fear equates to the strength of resistance. Therefore, listen to this, the more fear we feel about a specific enterprise, the more certain we can be that that enterprise is important to us and to the growth of our soul. That's why we feel so much resistance. If it meant nothing to us, there'd be no resistance. In one of the episodes with Bill Moyers, Joseph Campbell told Moyers that he didn't believe people were primarily seeking meaning in life, but looking for a vital experience, a sense of feeling truly alive. And that is the actual treasure we deliver to others, our sense of being alive, so that that vitality, that crackling energy, that love can spill out of us onto others. Most people never bother to enter the cave. The treasure isn't worth the terror of confronting a dragon. The problem is avoiding the cave doesn't actually keep us completely safe from the dragon. I'm sure all of you know the story of Count Dracula. Do you know what Dracula means? It is derived from the Romanian word dracu, which means dragon. So he's kind of a modern day dragon. It seems the Count was actually a member of a secret order of Christian knights called the Order of the Dragon. So the legend of Dracula has significant parallels to the dragon in the cave guarding a treasure. The cave in this case is his huge dark castle full of hidden labyrinthine passageways. And the treasure that he holds? Well, on a very surface level, it's his wealth. After all, he lives in a castle. He's had 500 years to accumulate wealth. It's also his vast knowledge. He's also had 500 years to learn whatever he wants. It's his worldly culture, sophistication, and eroticism. But more significantly, it's the mystery of eternal life. He is 500 years old. But obtaining his version of eternal life comes at a major price, as we know. Now, Count Dracula is a fearsome creature. The people in the local villages are all in a state of constant fear because they can see the castle on the hill. Now, they could simply not visit the castle, and then their fear would, I guess, theoretically go away. But here's the problem. Count Dracula doesn't always stay in the castle. He occasionally ventures out of his castle, visits the villages after midnight. He even travels and dines with the locals, and of course, takes victims. Now, by the way, you may be wondering about these images. These Dracula images come from a recent Netflix 3-part series. I think it's titled just Dracula. Came out in 2020, I believe. And in this version, Dracula has quite the dry wit. I think you would enjoy it. He's what James Bond would be if he were a vampire. I enjoyed the series very much. So we can avoid entering the cave, but the problem is the dragon will occasionally venture out of the cave and sear us on the ass. The only way to rid ourselves of the fear of the dragon, the power it holds over us, and the harm he brings is to confront him. St. George and the Dragon is a famous legend from the High Middle Ages. The treasure in this case is a woman. Now, why a woman? Dragons have no use of a woman, just like they have no use for a treasure. The woman, always a virgin princess, represents potentiality. If the hero slays the dragon and rescues the princess, then he can marry her, have children, expand his kingdom with her kingdom. And then a new, wonderful, beautiful order is created. That's really what the treasure is. It's fallow as long as the dragon guards it, but it represents enormous potential. Back to the Dracula series. This woman is Agatha Van Helsing. Van Helsing. Instead of Dr. Abraham Van Helsing from the original story, the Netflix version decided that Dracula's nemesis would be a scientifically minded, brash, atheist nun. As you can see, she's with the Count in his castle, where it is very dark. On an aside, it always used to bother me in the Dracula movies I watched as a kid that Van Helsing would choose to visit Dracula's castle late in the afternoon, when evening was fast approaching. What the hell was he thinking? I thought as a doctor and polymath, a supposed genius, he would be smart enough to visit Dracula's castle, I don't know, say right after early breakfast. Well, I guess what suspense is there in that, right? Okay, so obviously the screenwriters need Van Helsing acting like a moron to create suspense. But there is a deeper meaning for Van Helsing needing to cut it so close. He needs to confront his own fears. He needs to face a real living Dracula, not a Dracula who's comatose because it's high noon and the sun is blaring down on his coffin. If we achieve a treasure too easily, it doesn't really benefit us much. It can even harm us. Think of lottery winners. You see, we need to work for it, to exhibit courage, because confronting the dragon must make us grow in some way. Now, one final point on the dragon known as Dracula. Agatha Van Helsing and Abraham Van Helsing have their most success against Dracula when they enlist the help of others. We don't need to confront our dragons alone. In fact, maybe we shouldn't confront our dragons alone at all. We should enlist the aid of others. I recall when I gave a presentation on finding meaning and purpose in the second half of life, many of you expressed difficulty in knowing what your purpose was. You felt lost in a dark forest. What if you have no clue what the treasure is you are to seek, much less where to look for it? That's a great question. Many of us may not know what the treasure is that we are to seek, but I hope you have figured out by now where to look for your treasure. The dragon guards it. And many of us, with just a little bit of reflection, do know who our dragon is and where he resides. If we find our dragon, confront it, and defeat it, we find our treasure. Are you ready to seek your treasure in 2023? I'd like us to pause a moment and think about our own dragon. Many of us, me included, have dragons, plural. Some may be as large as the dragon Smaug from the Hobbit story by J.R.R. Tolkien. Some dragons are as small as a gecko. Go ahead and quickly list the ones you know. I'll give you a couple of minutes and then continue with this in just a moment. You can continue with this long after this presentation is over, but I'm going to pause and give you a couple of minutes right now. All right, let's go ahead and continue. I know most of you probably need more time with this, but when you're done, whenever you finish, I want you to identify your largest dragon, the dragon you most fear. This dragon guards your most significant treasure, the one that will also bring the most benefit to the rest of us. All right, that being said, how do we deal with the dragon? The real terror it causes us? Confronting the dragon may mean confronting a childhood trauma. It may mean confronting an addiction, a disease, a damaged relationship, a lack of money. It always means confronting a great fear. But remember again, Van Helsing, we don't have to go it alone. We can enlist the aid of others. I'd like to begin wrapping up this presentation with sharing a long forgotten memory that hit me out of the blue recently. I'm telling you this being a little vulnerable because it may help you in this process of your own self-exploration. The memory was of an event that took place over 2 decades ago, and I had completely forgotten about it for 2 decades. A long time ago, I met a girl on a plane. That sounds like a beginning of a cheap paperback novel. Pretty bad novel, doesn't it? A long time ago, I met a girl on a plane. Well, anyway, I was in seminary and embarking on a month-long travel and history course in Israel. The young lady I met was an Israeli returning from her 3-month tour of the United States after fulfilling her 2-year obligation in the Israeli army. That's what most citizens of Israel are required to do, spend 2 years in the military, usually after high school or college. Well, to make a long plane ride short for you, we bonded on that flight to Tel Aviv, Israel. We bonded despite the fact that she had been upgraded to a first-class seat because of her service in the army. Now, I tried to convince the airline stewardess to upgrade me too, and upgrade me to the seat next to the young woman. It didn't work. But I would sneak up to first class when the stewardess wasn't around and talk to my new friend. I must have gone up there a dozen times during the flight. When we got off the plane, and were about to go our separate ways, she gave me her phone number and address. She asked me to call her while I was there. Maybe I could even make a trip up to Haifa, where she lived. Well, the entire month I was in Israel, including 3 extra days I had tacked on once the class had ended, I never called her. Why didn't I call her? Well, maybe it's an overused cliche, but I had been hurt before in love. And I guess fear, resistance with a capital R, defeated me. I had seen a dark cave and heard the dragon inside. Now, maybe if I'd gone up there and really met her, there would have been no romance that developed, but possibly a great new friendship would have materialized. I don't know. But whatever would have happened, I lost that particular chance of feeling fully alive. The most significant part of that memory was the profound sense of regret I felt. It hit me hard that I was going to take that regret to my grave. Reflecting on it, I think it was my soul telling me, I have a dragon that needs slaying. But what about you? Has something similar happened to you? Has a memory, a dream, a strange occurrence struck you with similar force? If so, maybe your soul is calling you toward a cave to face a dragon and claim a treasure. I find myself agreeing more and more with Joseph Campbell that maybe our greatest purpose on earth is to experience being fully alive. Those moments where we feel like we have been lifted into heaven for a moment. I missed one big opportunity for that, and I know I've missed others. But I don't want to go to my grave with any more regrets. I don't want to experience a diminished life. I don't want you to experience that either. One blessing and curse in this big go-round we call life is that we have the freedom to choose. We can choose to avoid our dragons, or we can confront them and fight them. But know this, the longer we avoid the dragon, the larger it becomes. Let's admit that for some of us, our dragon has grown too large to defeat. Dates all the way back to our childhood, perhaps, and we haven't dealt with it. And there's no chance at this point of defeating it. Okay, that may be true. Why don't you look at the medium-sized ones? Or better, look at the little geckos and start there. Maybe with a few victories under our belt, we will develop the courage to fight the larger ones. So let me ask you, what treasure do you want to acquire in 2023? If you can't identify the treasure just yet, then start simply with the courage to enter the cave. Once you find your dragon, and definitely find the assistance to defeat it, you will surely find your treasure there. Well, I hope this presentation has been helpful for you on your journey. I'd like to open up now for questions or comments. The floor is open.